Welcome back to Don't Ghost Your Brain, the podcast where we delve into the fascinating world of neuroscience and how it can help us optimize our lives. I'm your host, Camille Casper, and in today's episode, we'll be exploring the topic of using neuroscience to study better. I have a 4.5 GPA, and I want to share with you how I use neuroscience to help me study better. And this is a project that I'm really passionate about, and this is why I chose it to be my first episode. So let's get right into it. Alright, so before we begin, we need to understand how our brain responds to stimuli. Keep in mind that our brains, literally any animal in the entire world, we are programmed to know what helps us survive and what is going to kill us. At the end of the day, our brain is just trying to keep us alive. So stimuli is a really important concept. So our brain is wired to react to different triggers in our environment. So for example, if you were out in the wild and you knew that this one berry could kill you, you saw that and that was a trigger, and it's like, no, your brain's like, no, I know that is wrong, so I have an association that is going to kill me. So when we encounter a stimulus, it sets off a chain of reactions in our brains, and it influences our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. On the other hand, let's say okay, so there's this fruit that if you walk down this path past the chirping birds and past these the waterfall, and then you get to this fruit and you're like, oh, I remember it was so good, this is just a hypothetical example, right? It was so good, it kept me full for a while. Your brain is like, okay, so it is worth it for me to eat this fruit because, okay, I'm full, it tasted good, I didn't die, and it kept me alive, So at the end of the day, that is what it's doing. So every single trigger, the rock pathway that you went down, the chirping birds, that's a sense, that's a stimulus. Every single one of our senses act as a stimulus in the brain. So whatever we see, you saw the path that you went down, you heard the birds that you did that, you saw the water and you might have tasted the water, you were thirsty or something. You could have also touched the leaves on the branches as you were walking by. So all of your senses are stimulus for the brain so that it knows, okay, I remember this, it fires in my neurons. Yes, I remember I'm going on the right path. I'm going to eventually get fed. So that just kind of gives you a little background on how I sort of I sort of explain stimulus to myself in just an easy hunter-gatherer way. I don't really know. But so stimulus is something that once I understood, I was like, oh, I can use this. And I don't know if you've ever read this book. It's Atomic Habits. It's super famous, and it was trending on social media for a while, and I remember reading it last summer, and it genuinely changed my life. Not even in a, it changed my life-changing way. No, it sparked my interest in neuroscience. Before then, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was thinking, I don't know, business or something. But then I read this book, and the author, he uses stories of neuroscience and just science and different cases to show how you can build habits, because at the end of the day, whenever you're uncomfortable, you're just going to go back to your habits. But he uses this neuroscience to explain it, and I highly, highly recommend the book. And he was the one that introduced me to the idea of stimulus and environmental triggers and how you can change your environmental triggers to change your habits. So that is something that I took into consideration when I was like, okay, I need to study, I need to get good grades, I need to understand what I'm learning in class so that I can fully grasp what I'm learning, So I highly recommended that book. I'm not going to get into the details, but definitely recommend. It was trending for a reason. So I think today I am just going to approach this episode with 3 different explanations of topics and how I approach studying with these 3 simple things. Really, I can't emphasize this enough. It's always about the smallest things. You do not have to make the biggest changes. I know how cliche this sounds, but the smallest of littlest changes, they're always the ones that make the biggest impacts. It's always like this inverted relationship. So let's get started. All right, so one thing about me, all of my friends know, I always buy it like at least a couple times a month. I always have gum on me. I don't know what it is. I like just having gum on me. And so at first it was kind of just like, oh yeah, my friends had it, I want some gum, after lunch or something. You can like freshen up your breath, or it just so it doesn't stay. And it was really nice for a while, but then I remember seeing this one video and it was like, oh, if you're tired and you still need to stay focused, you need to chew gum. I was like, what the heck? What? Okay, whatever. A lot of science behind this. So I remember looking at this one podcast by Science quickly, and it was really interesting because they were talking about a British Journal of Psychology study, and they were saying that the researchers found that gum increases the flow of oxygen to the brain and the regions in the brain that were responsible for retention. So the more oxygen that people had, the more the people could stay alert and improve their reflexes, which I thought was really interesting. But I also, at least in my eyes, it's another trigger, every single time you have that fresh breath or minty breath or just something to chew on, that could be another trigger for your brain to be like, oh, okay, it's study time, So that was always something that I really liked. And I don't think that people realize that it's such an easy thing, just pop it in your mouth. I mean, at least in my school, everybody has gum on them, So I think that's just such an easy way to be focused and just such a simple way of being like, oh, okay, yes, I'm going to tell my brain right now, okay, let's study, let's go, Even the National Library of Medicine posted this experiment that said chewing gum was associated with enhanced productivity and reduced cognitive errors at work, as well as heightened cortisol in the morning. And this is important because even though gum might not be a trigger for you right now, right? At this very moment while you're listening to me, it might not be a trigger for you, but if you make it a trigger, if every single time you made it a habit before you do a long study break, or if you do it before a test, or if you do it before you take notes in class, if you train your brain to say, okay, I'm going to study because now I have this stimulus, and this stimulus is going to trigger a response to help me be more focused, then automatically your brain is more engaged than it already was. It's more open, and you're able to study better and receive concepts and knowledge better. So I think this is something yes, it's talked about. Yes, it was trending a while back or something, but I think that this is just something that is not talked about and is almost too easy. It's just too easy to just stick a stick of gum in your mouth before you're going to study. It's these small things, these small little changes that are going to make the biggest difference. So I think this is the wrap of the first one. So let's get into this. All right, the next big one is actually something I can't take credit for. I read it in Atomic Habits, so this is why I'm saying you guys should read this book. So one thing is, I have always been a heavy sleeper. I've never thought much about it. I kind of just always just fell asleep. I've never waken up in the middle of the night. I've slept through so many earthquakes I could not even tell you, and I live in California. So I've always been a heavy sleeper, so sleep has never been my issue. But I've realized that I've gotten a lot better sleep ever since I started doing this. So again, it's this stimuli trigger response, or actually it also relates to associations in the brain, how our brain associates different places or different triggers with different things, right? So it's just the neurons firing, it's neurons making stronger connections every single time you do an activity in a different place. Those are associations, right? You might have associations with praying in church, or you might have associations with showering in your shower, or different things that your brain knows, okay, I see this place, I know what I do in this place because I've done it before, and I've survived. Again, it's all about that survival instinct at the end of the day, right? So, your bed is supposed to be a place where you are resting, you are giving your brain a break, you are decompressing and de-stressing, and basically your body is healing itself in the 8 hours that hopefully we all get a day. I know I don't all the time, but your brain and your bed should be having a relationship that is solely based on sleep. And I'm guilty of this a little bit more, just because summer's coming in and homework is lessening and lessening. But do not do homework on your bed. Do not study on your bed. Do not do anything else on your bed that is not sleeping. And this might sound so basic, but I feel like a lot of us in this day and age do not follow this through. I see, it's really hard not to, chill on your phone, in your bed, or, just, it's comfortable in your bed, right? It's hard not to, bring your laptop into bed and be okay, even, sometimes I'll watch a movie, but, I feel guilty about it, too, because, it is not where I should be, associating my movie time or my homework time. And again, I keep on saying this and I keep on repeating myself, so if you take away one thing from this episode, it's that the smallest little things change the way that you live your life, right? And this is the craziest thing I've noticed. Even though I was already a heavy sleeper, I've noticed such a difference in the deepness of my sleep. So this, I think this will be hard for a lot of people, because a lot of people, we're always on our phones, we're always on our laptops, and staying in your bed, like I said earlier, is comfortable, and then I just got a puppy, and my puppy loves laying on my bed next to me. What am I gonna do? Go sit on my chair while my puppy sleeps in my comfortable bed? No. So I think that this is a really hard thing, but it's better if you do your work in a different room. But I know this is not possible for a lot of people. It's definitely not possible for me. I do not live in a big house. So I have this big desk, which I'm recording at now, where I do all of my homework. Sometimes I'll do it on the floor just if I get really tired. But I never, ever, ever let myself do homework on my bed. It is just a big no. I've just crossed it out. I can never do that. And when I tell you consistently every single night, I'm hitting the pillow and falling asleep immediately. There's no lagging time. There's no trying to get myself to fall asleep. I've never had to experience that, just because of this small little habit. And I think that this is really, really important. So that goes to say, you need to study at your best. You need to kind of categorize yourself, almost make yourself a robot. Okay, here is where I study. Here is where I read. Here is where I sleep. Here is where I eat. These places have to be separate for your brain to, obviously there can be a little bit of overlap, but definitely not study and sleep. Those are two very different things, and you do not want to be sleepy when you're studying. You want to be fully present and awake and able to complete your homework or complete your studying materials so that you are better able to perform. And also, just the better that you sleep, the easier the retention of memory will be. Sleep is insanely important. I don't think people realize this. The National Institutes of Health literally say that each phase of sleep cycle restores and rejuvenates the brain for optimal function. And when sleep is deprived, the active process of the lymphatic system does not have time to perform that function, so toxins can build up. So basically, when you don't sleep, when you pull an all-nighter, when you get 2 hours of sleep and then chug coffee after, it's equivalent to like opening up your brain and just pouring in poison, pouring in acid. You know, in like the little like cartoons, like the black bottle with the little like X poison like skull mark on it, you're essentially pouring that into your brain. Same thing if you don't sleep enough. And I don't think people realize this, because we live in a society where like it's like, oh, I pulled an all-nighter last night, like, to do all my homework. Like, no, you should not be pulling an all-nighter. I have my phone set where at 11:30 everything shuts off. Like, I literally cannot. I love doing my homework at night. Like, there's just something about it that I get energy. I don't know. But I always do my homework at night, but I never let myself do anything past 11:30, because I always just think about it. You're literally pouring that cartoon vase, like black vase bottle of just poison, and it's the green and it's like steam coming up, you know, like it's the equivalent. So why would you why would you brag about other people about literally destroying your brain? Like, toxins are building up in your brain as you're trying to do this, instead of just studying like across like a time period. So I think that is something that is not talked about enough, and we need to, because our brains, literally the way that we make decisions, literally the way that we stay alive, that we know to pump blood to our hearts. So basically sleep, and don't do your homework in the place that you're going to sleep. Essentially, that's what you should grab from this point. All right, so let's go into the next one. The next thing is as simple as it sounds, is that there's this theory where doing anything for more than 90 minutes can't be better than taking a break. So your brain can't be expected to fire for more than 90 minutes in a consistent task and do better than it would have just if it took a 15-minute break. That's usually the recommendation, 90 to 15. That's usually the recommended ratio. And it's actually the Tony Schwartz's theory, and he's the founder of the Energy Project, and he teaches this, and it's kind of like, it's essentially based off the idea that the way your heart pulses, so there's a pulse between the expending energy and the renewing energy. And so this is in Forbes. There's a magazine on it. You guys can, or an article on it. You guys can look at it. But so what's important about this is that you should know that you can't just crank stuff out. If you study one day for 15 hours nonstop, that is not going to get you nearly as far if you would have just taken a chunk of an hour and a half throughout the week. Would have been the same thing. Would have been better if you would have just spread it out. If you would have planned it just a little bit better. You already planned that you were going to take 15 hours out of your day. Okay, then just plan 1.5 hours every single day for a week. You know, like, that is just going to make such a huge difference. So that just goes into the topic of procrastination. And procrastination is another big thing. People just assume that like procrastination comes from being lazy or just plain like just incompetence, but it's actually nothing of the case. It's a constant battle in our brain between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. And this is in netslabs.com. I really like their articles. So the limbic system, which is also called the paleomammalian brain, is one of the oldest and our most dominant portions of the brain. And its processes are mostly automatic, but when you feel like your whole body is telling you to flee from an unpleasant situation, that's your limbic system talking. It's also tightly connected to the prefrontal cortex. But our prefrontal cortex is newer and less developed, and as a result, it's just the weaker portion of the brain in comparison to the limbic system. So this is the part of your brain where planning complex behaviors and expressing your personality and making decisions happen. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that really separates humans from animals who are just controlled by stimulus, explains Dr. Tim Cycle. And this is literally from their article, so I definitely recommend checking it out. But more often than not, our limbic system wins because, it's just more like developed in our bodies and it's stronger. And this is what leads us to procrastination. And it almost feels good. Like, the way that I see it, it's kind of like this cycle. It's like, okay, like, I know I have something due, right? And you're like, okay, I could either enjoy what I'm going to do now, or I could do this and then enjoy it later. So it's delayed gratification. That's another thing. There's a whole another episode we'll talk about. There's so much that I want to talk about. But so the way that you're like, okay, you have these two decisions, and this is the limbic and the prefrontal cortex. So more often than not, you're going to be like, you know what, I want to enjoy, I'm tired. We usually make these excuses for ourselves. And by all means, we all are tired. That's not the problem. But it's just a matter of choosing now, pleasure now, or delayed gratification, which is you're not going to be stressed when the deadline comes along. But okay, let's say you make the decision. I am very much guilty of this. I just want to put that out there. I procrastinate all the time. It is getting close to summer. I have not done anything 2 days in ahead. I've always done it either a couple days or something. It's been bad, and I'm usually really on top of my work, but it's been bad. So, yeah. The way that it kind of makes sense in my head, and I'm not completely sure if this is right, but it's almost like a reward system. Like, you're stressing, there's an adrenaline. Oh my God, am I going to get it in on time? I have 30 more minutes to write this. Let's go. And you do it, and you hit submit before 11:59, and you're like, oh my God, I did it. Look at me. I did something that probably took all my classmates 2.5 hours, took me 45 minutes. Look at me. I just did that, and the way that I see it, at least in the peers in my class, I see it as like this kind of adrenaline rush and this reward system, and it's very intoxicating because you only can do it when you're under pressure, and some people work great under pressure and some people don't. But that's how I see procrastination in every day. Instead of going through this feedback loop, every single time you might not know it, you might be chasing that high, actually. That is something that you have to figure out yourself as like just a student, as a person, as a learner, as a human being in general, but I think that it's really important to schedule out your study sessions so that you're able to do your studying or your homework. I'm just going to say studying for the entire time. That's going to encapsulate everything. And you should just be able to do in 90-minute increments. And this is really important because then afterwards you can take like a 15-minute walk. Like I mentioned, like I just got a puppy. I've noticed such a difference like in my mood from before I go on a walk to after. Like, there's something about it. I can do a whole another podcast episode if you want, like about how walks are just insane. Like, there are like neuroscans of like what your brain looks like just sitting and doing nothing for 20 minutes and what your brain looks like after doing a 20-minute super duper light walk, and it's just so much more active. I don't know, something about it just going on like these tiny little walks, like it has just changed my mood so much. So I recommend just getting out, getting a little vitamin D, like smelling, I don't know, fresh air, not the air that you're sitting and marinating in your room. But I think that it's just important to schedule out. And it really doesn't take that much of a time. Take out a piece of paper and just write what's due, approximately how long everything's going to take, and just plan it out. I think that I'm going to say it again. Of course, these small little things, the same amount of time that you would have taken in, again, that 15-hour day, you could have spread it across multiple days, couple increments of 1.5 hours, and you would have accomplished the same thing in less time, and you would have understood the material more because you're not trying to cram your brain into everything. Have you ever had I do this all the time, where if I cram too close to the test, you could ask me about the content on the test 5 days after, I could not tell you. I have not a clue what the test was about, what the study materials are, what the formulas were, not a clue. But when I take it by increments, and when I just space out the time that I'm studying and the time that I'm reinforcing, again, the neurons firing, and that when I take that time to do that, I find that my results are so much higher than what they originally were. So I think that this is really important. It's just a rule. If you work for 90 minutes, you take a 15-minute break. It's a good habit to lean back on, so that obviously, 1, not to overwork yourself, and 2, not to underwork yourself. It's that Goldilocks effect. It's that happy medium, So I think that once you can get that down and you have a feel for how much time you need on different things, you can arrange these little increments of time around your day, around your commitments, whatever you need to do, and bam, all of a sudden you go into the test and you're like, I'm confident. You do your homework, I'm confident. I know what I did, and I know that I performed under my best cognitive abilities. Obviously, probably not thinking that when you walk into the classroom. But I think that this is it was such I keep on saying this, but it was just such a small change that literally changed the way that my outlook on school, So I think that just going over our little things, today we learned about stimuli. We learned about how triggers in our environment lead to, again, triggering response from the stimuli. Those go hand in hand. Hopefully we got that. And then so the 3 things that I recommend that are incredibly small but incredibly influential are to chew gum, to never ever ever study on your bed. Just create a little nook in your room on the floor. I love studying on the floor. Just create a designated space where you could go to it solely every single time for doing your work, and your brain's like, oh, association with work, got it. And then last thing is the 90-15 minute rule. So I just think that these 3 things have helped me so incredibly much, and I wanted to share them because I think that the neuroscience behind this is so interesting. Because who knew that procrastination was actually just a fight between the 2 regions of your brain, So I think that's interesting. So if you guys have any comments, let me know. We have an Instagram, and we just brought up our TikTok account, so please feel free to reach out and let me know. But if not, join us every single Friday at 9 p.m. Pacific time, 12 a.m. Eastern time. Thank you so much. This is Don't Ghost Your Brain by Camille Casper.